breakout sessions will go by quickly. Please respond to our polling questions as concisely as possible so that everyone gets a chance to contribute. We want and need your experiences and ideas as we work together to create substantive, long-term strategies that the state will implement to achieve this goal. Now, I would like to turn it over to Jen Norris to share a tribal acknowledgement. Jen?
Thank you, Cece. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I am Jennifer Norris, Deputy Secretary for Biodiversity and Habitat. I would like to start by acknowledging the importance of tribal communities in this process. Our tribal partners are integral to achieving the goals set forth in the governor's executive order. We know that by working together, we can further safeguard the environment, preserve tribal cultural practices, and strengthen relationships between the state and tribal nations. The Resources Agency is currently engaging tribes through government-to-government consultations. In addition, in coming months, we will be holding tribal listening sessions to engage tribes, solicit tribal input, and explore opportunities to collaborate. We look forward to working with our tribal partners, and we encourage those who would like to connect with us on tribal perspectives to visit our website to see a schedule of the listening sessions. Please visit our website at www.resources.ca.gov. I also want to acknowledge any elected officials that joined us today. Thank you so much for your participation. Public involvement and engagement remain critically important to the state, even as we continue to navigate the COVID-19 pandemic. We know that virtual meetings are not the ideal way to talk with stakeholders, various communities, and the public, but we didn't want to delay this important part of the work in advancing 30 by 30 and climate smart lands. We hope that while this isn't how we envisioned, it's a productive and positive process for everyone. The collaborative process is a significant aspect of how we will be able to achieve the goals outlined in the executive order. As we begin our conversations today, I want to underscore our commitment to engaging all voices, all perspectives, and to advancing equity in everything we do. We will begin today with opening remarks from Wade Crowfoot, Secretary of the California Natural Resources Agency, which the agency that protects and manages California's natural resources, including our forests, rivers, waterways, coast and ocean, fish and wildlife, and energy. Here's Secretary Crowfoot.
I'm Wade Crowfoot, our California Natural Resources Secretary. Welcome and thank you for joining one of 9 virtual regional workshops to advance nature-based solutions across our state. Last fall, Governor Newsom issued an executive order that elevated the role of nature in both combating climate change, maintaining and protecting our biological diversity, and achieving more equitable access to our outdoors. In our agency, the Natural Resources Agency, we're really excited about the governor's leadership that's of course matched by our legislature on expanding environmental conservation across our state to achieve these multiple objectives. We live in a remarkable state, known around the world for our natural diversity of plants and animals, topographies, ecosystems, and our cultural diversity, where we are succeeding and thriving across all conceivable differences within our human species. The work that you'll be involved in and the input you provide will ensure that looking forward in coming years and decades, we craft smart, ambitious, but achievable strategies to expand environmental conservation and utilize nature in the fight against climate change. In that executive order that Governor Newsom issued last fall, he called for conserving 30% of our state's land and coastal waters by 2030, which we call the 30 by 30 target. He also called for the development of a climate smart land strategy so we can understand how we better manage both our natural and working lands to both remove carbon from the atmosphere and protect people and nature from the impacts of climate change. The best ideas we have and the most effective actions will achieve multiple benefits. At the same time, combating climate change, preserving biodiversity, and expanding recreational and outdoor access for all Californians. We know there are no one-size-fits-all solutions from Sacramento for this work, and our regions are so different in both the challenges they face and the opportunities they offer, that these regional workshops are really critical to help us understand what is the situation in your part of California. What are critical priorities in this area that we need to address? What are challenges you face to environmental conservation and climate action and equitable access? And importantly, what are opportunities for our state agency and more importantly, our state government to help you seize these opportunities in your region to expand equitable, thoughtful, sustainable, balanced environmental conservation? So we're really excited with your participation and look forward to these regional workshops figuring in and informing both a strategy for the achievement of the 30 by 30 target and our climate smart land strategy coming up in recent months. Really appreciate all that you do in your own lives on these important topics, and very excited to hear from you today and in coming weeks and months. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Crowfoot. Now I'd like to turn the mic over to Amanda Hansen, Deputy Secretary for Climate Change. Amanda.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. My name is Amanda Hansen, and I'm going to provide some background on why Governor Newsom issued an executive order on nature-based solutions, what nature-based solutions are and why they matter. I'm also going to outline our goals for the Natural and Working Lands Climate Smart Strategy and explore how it might be able to support your regional priorities. I'm then going to turn it over to my colleague, Jen, to provide background on 30 by 30. Climate change and biodiversity loss are among the top 5 threats humanity will face in the next 10 years. And as we know all too well, California is not immune to these crises. Last year alone, historic wildfires burned over 4 million acres in California. Lives were lost, homes and businesses were destroyed, public health suffered from hazardous air quality, and nature we treasure is gone. These fires took place in the middle of a deadly pandemic and heat wave, and on the heels of the most extreme drought in the state's history. California is considered one of the world's 36 biodiversity hotspots because of its high concentration of unique species that are also experiencing unprecedented threats, including climate change. The governor issued the executive order in direct response to these threats and outlined a comprehensive and results-oriented nature-based solutions agenda for California, which brings us to what are nature-based solutions and why are they important? Nature-based solutions are actions that work with and enhance nature to help address societal challenges. They are important because they provide multiple benefits at the same time, many of which we depend on for our well-being. This slide shows a few examples of nature-based solutions that address climate change and protect biodiversity. The circular image you see in the middle there is an example of community greening, a suite of nature-based solutions that can cool communities facing extreme heat, reduce energy costs, allow soils to better absorb water, expand access to nature, enhance biodiversity, reduce the impacts of pollution, and increase quality of life. The top right image shows wetlands and riparian areas which sequester carbon, reduce flood risk, filter pollution, and protect habitat. The right middle image is an example of an agricultural nature-based solution. This hedgerow supports pollinators, improves habitat, conserves water, enhances our food supply, and contributes to our economic prosperity. And finally, the lower right image speaks to the many benefits nature-based solutions in our forests deliver to Californians. Healthy forests reduce the threat of catastrophic wildfire and serve as a carbon sink They also capture and clean our water supply, improve air quality, provide habitat for wildlife, and support local economies. Natural and working lands is the term that we use here in California to describe the nature-based solutions sector. And this sector consists of the iconic landscapes we know and love: our forests, wetlands, croplands, community green spaces, grasslands, deserts, and more. These lands cover 90% of the state's 104 million acres. They can sequester carbon and protect people and nature from the impacts of climate change. And they've been a missing piece of our state's climate agenda. So the Natural and Working Lands Climate Smart Strategy is really intended to close that gap. We're excited to align relevant existing state efforts under one cohesive strategy and identify land management actions that will help all of us protect vulnerable communities, achieve carbon neutrality, improve public health and safety, and expand economic opportunity. We are here today to learn about nature-based climate solutions that are important to you and how our statewide strategy can support the San Joaquin Valley region's environmental, economic, and equity priorities. For example, the San Joaquin Valley region represents the most agriculturally productive region in California. Are there actions the state's strategy can prioritize to support the agriculture sector in adapting to climate change and contributing to carbon neutrality? The science tells us this region is likely to face increased temperatures over time. Are you envisioning nature-based solutions playing a role to reduce heat risks to your communities, such as green roofs, community tree canopy, and vertical gardens? The vast majority of San Joaquin Valley lands are privately owned. So how might the state support climate smart management of these lands? How can we partner? And finally, are there careers in the natural and working land sector you'd like to elevate in the San Joaquin Valley region, such as community foresters, carbon farmers, or native plant landscapers? I'm really excited to hear from all of you today, and I'm now going to turn it over to my colleague, Jen. Thank you.
Thanks, Amanda. Hi, I'm Jen again, Jen Norris, and I'm running point on the 30 by 30 initiative. As you have heard, our goal is to conserve 30% of our lands and coastal waters by 2030. And we want to do so in a manner that protects biodiversity, combats climate change, increases access to nature, and safeguards our economic sustainability and food supply. We're being purposeful in our approach. We want to conserve places that effectively protect the biological diversity of California, our unique plants and animals. We also want to conserve lands and waters that meaningfully address climate change in the ways that Amanda outlined. And we want to conserve in a way that provides equitable access to nature and its benefits, like clean water, clean air, climate resilience, and recreation. So what kinds of places are we talking about? Here are some examples from this region. The San Joaquin River Parkway, over 2,500 acres in the heart of Fresno. It's used for biking, hiking, fishing, and floating. Protected by the San Joaquin River Conservancy, these lands are part of a planned 22-mile-long natural and recreational area in the floodplain. This place provides habitat for Swainson's hawk and spring-run Chinook salmon. Riparian areas along the river slow flood flows and filter water, improving its quality. Kern National Wildlife Refuge, over 11,000 acres of natural desert uplands, relic riparian corridor, and developed marsh. This place provides optimum wintering habitat for migratory birds. It's used by hunters and hikers, and is also home to endangered species like the blunt-nosed leopard lizard and Tipton kangaroo rat. And finally, this Grasslands Mitigation Bank, which adds 275 acres of permanent conservation to the Grasslands Ecological Area, which is the largest contiguous wetland block remaining in California. Sited adjacent to the Volta State Wildlife Area, this parcel enlarges the protected landscape with seasonal wetlands, managed marsh, and uplands, and provides important habitat for the southernmost population of the threatened giant garter snake. This bank is managed through grazing and protected under a conservation easement. Achieving 30 by 30 will rely on the accumulation of places like this across the state. Good conservation can happen on every conceivable land type and through lots of different strategies. And as the Secretary said, one size does not fit all. And at the end of the day, conservation happens locally, so we need to work together. By February 2022, we will deliver our Pathways to 30 by 30 document, which will identify opportunities and strategies to achieve 30 by 30. It will also identify challenges to meeting our goal. This document is intended to set us on a path to successful implementation of 30 by 30. Today, we want to hear from your region and hear your perspectives on what those opportunities and challenges are. We're interested to know how you think we should go about achieving conservation. Which strategies to conserve lands and waters are most effective in this region? We want to invest in the successful approaches. Tell us what those are. At the same time, we'd like to know which strategies are more challenging and why, so we can work to address those gaps. Your insights today will be used to develop our document and to help us define what does conservation mean in California. You'll be asked later to share what conservation looks like to you. The executive order called for the establishment of this collaborative approach in recognition of the fact that partners across the state have experience and expertise that we can learn from. This conversation is the beginning of what we hope is an ongoing partnership. 30 by 30 isn't a new mandate, and it won't be accomplished from the top down. By sharing your insights with us, we hope to learn how we can be more effective partners. Our ultimate goal is for 30 by 30 to be an open source movement for people across the state from a diverse array of sectors to commit to achieving 30 by 30 and work with us in partnership. Thank you again for being here. I really look forward to hearing your ideas. Now I will hand it over to my colleague, Mark Gold.
Thanks, Jen. Great to see such a good turnout this afternoon. I'm really glad to be here today as we focus on some of the most pressing issues facing California's efforts to protect our natural habitats, combat climate change, and ensure biodiversity in this great state. For those of you who are not familiar with the Ocean Protection Council, we have a mission to ensure that California maintains healthy, resilient, and productive ocean and coastal ecosystems. The OPC works across various state agencies to coordinate activities related to ocean protection. And we also establish policies that facilitate the collection and sharing of scientific data, as well as identify policy areas that need to be addressed at both the state and federal levels. State waters run from the tide lines to 3 miles out, and 16% of coastal waters are part of the statewide Marine Protected Area Network. There are 124 MPAs in that network. 9% of state coastal marine waters are protected through no-take reserves, and another 7% are limited commercial and/or recreational take MPAs. The MPA network is approaching a decadal review of this program by the end of 2022, and currently we are not looking at potential MPA expansion as part of the 30 by 30 path development for the ocean, nor will we until after the completion of the MPA network decadal review. Our coastal regions and oceans are important ecosystems that are not only places where species thrive, but also serve as main attractions for California residents and visitors who want to enjoy the sand, water, and features of our coastline. These areas are also integral to our economy with aquaculture, energy generation, and the network of ports up and down the state that are essential to the movement of goods in and out of California and the entire nation and beyond. Climate change threatens the coast and ocean with rising sea level rise and ocean acidification, while other coastal resources suffer from the impacts of water pollution, harmful algal blooms, and habitat loss. We must take steps now to prevent further erosion of the coast and loss of rocky intertidal habitats, wetlands and beaches, the loss of kelp forests, and the loss of marine life. In order to develop the path to 30 by 30 for coastal waters, stakeholder engagement will be critical to better define what conservation means for California's coastal zone and waters. As examples, California has 34 areas of special biological significance identified, 3 national estuary programs, 3 national estuarine research reserves, and 4 national marine sanctuaries that are all critical for conservation. Most of these areas have additional conservation measures, such as oil, gas, and mineral extraction bans in marine sanctuaries, and pollution discharge limits in areas of special biological significance. We can look at these areas as potential candidates for additional conservation measures. Overall, this planning effort will enable California to develop practical and scientifically based strategies that will get us to 30 by 30 for our coastal regions and ocean waters. Thanks, and now back to Jen.
Thanks, Mark. So if you watched our January webinar, you know that we have been working with Esri on a geospatial information system called CA Nature. This system is being designed to be a publicly accessible suite of interactive mapping and visualization tools. CA Nature will bring together maps of biodiversity, climate change, and access, so we can view and analyze different features of the landscape in one place. It will allow us to identify places across California where we have an opportunity to achieve our biodiversity, climate, and equity goals. We will use CA Nature to assess what percentage of California is already conserved and to track progress toward our goal. We're currently developing CA Nature using authoritative statewide data that we currently have or have access to. But of course, this is only the first version. We expect to expand this system over time, integrating new data that reflects changes in our understanding and knowledge. Some of you have been asking how you can provide data for use in CA Nature. There is now a submission form on our website where you can provide information about the types of data you want us to consider for future versions. We are most interested in statewide information that meets our program objectives and has strong scientific data and documentation standards. Please stay tuned for future updates on CA Nature. I will now turn the mic over to Debbie Schechter.
Thanks, Jen. As you've heard from Amanda, Jen, and Mark, the state has been very busy since Governor Newsom issued the executive order. Let's zoom out and look at where we've been and where we're going next. Sorry about my mic. Since Governor Newsom issued the executive order last October, the California Natural Resources Agency and its partner agencies have made some important progress towards developing these strategies. In January, a kickoff webinar hosted by the state that drew in over 800 interested parties. Also in January, the state began a formal consultation process with California Native American tribes, and we continue to hold tribal listening sessions in the coming months to share information, solicit tribal input, and collaborate. We've also been engaging with interested parties and stakeholders from around the state to hear perspectives and insights related to these efforts. The californianature.ca.gov website was launched in April to serve as a portal for visitors to learn and engage in developing the pathways to 30 by 30 and the natural and working lands climate smart strategy. We also released a public input questionnaire in April to gather experiences and ideas from a broad cross-section of Californians. The questionnaire is open until May 14th, so please check it out and provide additional information and input. And today is the 5th of the 9 regional workshops that we're hosting to gather input and perspectives. These virtual webinars are open to all interested parties, no matter where you reside, and you're welcome to attend more than one of them. Beginning this summer, CNRA will convene several topical advisory panels to address key questions to support the development of the Pathways to 30 by 30 document, the Natural and Working Lands Climate Smart Strategy, and the CA Nature GIS tool. Each advisory panel will produce a summary document that gives context to their topic area, offers technical or other insights, and provides key recommendations. Topics will include issues related to climate change, biodiversity, defining conservation, and equitable approaches to this work. The panel will also present their deliberations and recommendations in a two-part virtual meeting, concluding with time for public comment on the topic that will be received by CNRA leadership. We'll use the information we gathered in the drafting of the Climate Smart Land Strategy document, which will be released this summer for public review and input. This important document will be finalized and delivered in October as we begin the next phase of this effort. Throughout the fall, we'll host another series of virtual workshops to update the public on our progress and invite more participation. And we'll also be drafting and releasing the other strategy document, Pathways to 30 by 30. The public's review and input on this document will be critical, just like for Climate Smart Lands. And this strategy document will be finalized and delivered in February of 2022. As it was mentioned earlier, ongoing public involvement and engagement remains critically important to the state, even as we continue to navigate the COVID-19 pandemic. The collaborative process is a significant aspect of how we will be able to achieve the goals outlined in the executive order. And as conditions improve, we look forward to scheduling in-person opportunities to get your insights and perspectives. To support this effort, we've launched a new website, www.californianature.ca.gov, to serve as a portal of information about advancing 30 by 30 and climate smart lands. This new website features information about the executive order, how nature-based solutions work, important data on climate change and California, ways to get involved through regional workshops and other events, as well as a place to share your insights. This website is integral to ensuring that the state has robust public engagement in meeting the goals of this effort. That's why californianature.ca.gov also features an interactive public input questionnaire designed to solicit input that can be used in developing the two strategy documents to guide the work we must do as a state. Please visit www.californianature.ca.gov to learn more, share your input, and stay informed as we work to achieve these critical goals. And we also want you to stay in touch. Please contact us, ask questions, or provide your experiences and ideas via these multiple platforms, email, regular mail, voicemail. Now I'm going to turn it over to Jenna Tourget for the Exploring the Region segment of this workshop.
Thank you, Debbie. Now we are moving into the portion of today's workshop that focuses in on perspectives in the San Joaquin Valley region and provide an opportunity for the public to participate in the process. Today's regional workshop is in the San Joaquin Valley region. And for our purposes, the region consists of Kings, Merced, San Joaquin, and Stanislaus counties, as well as the western extents of Fresno, Kern, Madera, and Tulare counties. Over 4 million people call the San Joaquin Valley home, and it is the second fastest growing region in the state. Of course, it is also the state's agricultural hub. The majority of the San Joaquin Valley land area is used for agriculture. However, this also represents a significant source of agro-tourism for the region and state. The region produced more revenue from agriculture than all of other regions combined, with a total agricultural revenue of over 36 billion. Almonds and milk are some of the leading commodities. As you probably know, the San Joaquin Valley region is rich in both natural and agricultural lands. As might be expected, the region's land cover is predominantly developed for agricultural purposes or cropland. This accounts for 47% of the region's total land area. Also prominent are grassland and shrubland, representing 23% and 11% of land area, respectively. Settlements are approximately 7% of the land area, wetlands 3%, and barren lands 2%. Water covers a little less than 2% of the region. The region also hosts the largest expanses of high groundwater recharge potential in the state. 12,500 square miles of the region's almost 17,000 are mapped with 13% rated excellent, 12% good, and 12% rated moderately good. These represent each the largest areas in these categories statewide. The high recharge potential areas occur primarily on the alluvial deposits from the Sierra Nevada and coastal ranges around the valley's perimeter and extending out onto the valley floor. This is a dynamic region that contributes greatly to the entire state. We wanted to provide this regional snapshot before we dive further into our meeting. Your perspective will be important as we move into the next section, where we engage with you and gather your input on a series of questions that will be used in developing strategies. To get your experiences and ideas, we'll be using a software called Poll Everywhere. There will be 3 ways to participate. You can participate on your computer by opening a browser window like Chrome, Explorer, or Edge, and going to www.pollev.com/KWPOLL1. That's www.pollev.com/KWPOLL1. You can also participate on your smartphone by opening a browser and going to www.pollev.com/KWPOLL1. It's the same address on your phone or your web browser. And again, these addresses are in the chat box as well. You can also participate by using a text message. You can send a text to 22333. That's 22333 with the message KWPOLL1. That's KWPOLL1 into the text message as well. Our facilitators will let you know when to use your preferred option to respond to questions. We'll ask the questions and want to hear what you think, and this tool allows us to save your answers to help inform the direction of this initiative. So we're going to go on to our first question. But I want to say, if you're typing 2 words, type an underscore between the 2 words, and that way we can see the full word that you might be saying. So I'm seeing some answers come in through the poll here. We have the word cloud. I'm seeing folks joining us from Fresno, folks joining from Sacramento, from Bakersfield, Visalia, from Porterville, from the Sierra Nevada, from Berkeley. I see folks joining us from Georgia. Looks like we have a good range of people centered it on Fresno, Sacramento, Bakersfield, Mariposa. Okay, I'm going to move us on to the next question here. This will also be a word cloud, and I'm sorry, this will not be a word cloud. This is a multiple choice, and the question is, what sector do you represent? So what sector do you represent? Again, KW poll 1 to 22333 or pollev.com/KW poll 1. So the 5 options or the 6 options are A, government, which is federal, state, or local, tribal government or tribal community, business, investor, or labor. D is non-government, community-based organization. E is academic, and F is public. So I see answers coming in. We have a pretty broad range of folks here from the non-government, community-based organization. I see we also have some good representation from our governmental sectors. We have folks joining from the general public, people who are business, investors, or laborers. We have folks from the academic world. And that looks like a pretty good spread across the board. And I know that there's some people on as well who haven't been able to respond. But as we move into the questions and poll everywhere, hopefully we'll be able to get everyone's responses as well. Okay, let's head on to the next question. And this question will be a word cloud, so remember to use the underscore between 2 words. So the question is, when you think about nature or special places in this region, what comes to mind? And again, you can join from your browser, or if you'd rather send a text message in, you can send a text message in too. That number is 22333 as a text message with the word KW poll 1. And the link to this again is in the chat box as well. So when you think about nature or special places in the region, what comes to mind? See the San Joaquin River. I see scrub, wetlands, oak woodlands. I'm seeing grasslands, endangered species, rivers and watersheds, floodplains, agriculture. So these are special places in the region. It's great to see all of these rich responses here. We're going to take another 5 to 10 seconds on this. I see vernal pools. All right. Okay, I think we are ready to move on. So I want to thank you all for your active participation in this plenary session portion of this meeting. A key goal of this meeting is to further invite your input to help inform the development of the Natural Lands Climate Smart Strategy and the 30 by 30 pathway document. And as we have such a large number of participants, we're going to transition into breakout rooms so that your participation and input can be most effectively captured. So in the breakout session, we'll be asking you to provide your experiences and ideas in 3 areas regarding regional interests and current efforts, regional challenges, and regional opportunities. So participants who requested interpretation upon registration will remain in the main accommodations room. So this is the main room, also the accommodations room. Because you'll be staying here, you will not get a prompt to join a breakout room. Other webinar participants will be randomly assigned to either a breakout room 1, breakout room 2, or stay in this room as well. So we'll capture webinar participants' input in the 2 breakout rooms, similarly to how we've done it so far in the plenary session here. Recognizing that the questions are high level and that we're asking you to share brief responses, we're hoping to get some common themes from those responses. The intent is also to provide an opportunity for participants to see and be able to reflect on others' responses. Following these workshops, the facilitation team will compile all of the responses to all of the questions and prepare a meeting summary containing a synthesis of common themes. All responses will be treated equally and will be included in the meeting summary appendices. And remember that there's a public input questionnaire that's running parallel to the regional workshops. This questionnaire is intended to provide interested communities and members of the public with a more detailed opportunity to provide targeted input to inform the development of the 30 by 30s pathway document and the natural and working lands climate smart strategy. Since phone participants can't provide input via a computer browser, we will accommodate you in this main room. Again, you will not receive a prompt to join a breakout room, and many of you will receive a prompt, some of you won't, but follow the prompt that you receive. So if you're asked to join a breakout room, head to that breakout room and follow the prompt on your screen. So we want to thank you all for your patience in the next few moments as we transition into breakout rooms. All right, thank you for your patience as we are transitioning into our perspective breakout rooms for the interactive portion of today's meeting. You're in the accommodations room or just the main plenary room, and we're welcoming phone only and non-English speaking participants, as well as a lot of other people as well. And as a reminder, one, we are still recording this session and streaming live on YouTube for others to be able to view at a later time. And two, our interpretation services are still available. So if you joined this late to this room, please look for interpretation instructions in the chat. Again, my name is Jenna Tourget. I'm your facilitator during this session. We have a lot of information to give you up front, so I want to make sure you have proper instructions so we can ensure everyone can participate. So I also wanted to acknowledge that Mark Gold is in the room with us. Mark, if you can say a quick hello as well.
Hi, everybody. I'm glad we have such a good turnout here and really looking forward to hear your responses to the questions that we have. And we're really looking at each and every one of them very carefully. So looking forward to seeing them.
All right, thank you so much, Mark. And you'll hear from him throughout the session as well. I wanted to remind folks that any time during the session, if you have technical difficulties, you can call or text 619-890-5955 if you can't get a hold of someone in the chat, but I think we have people helping you out in the chat as well. So I have quite a few instructions up front. I invite you to settle in just for a moment as we go through the instructions. We want to make sure everyone can participate. So we recognize we have a few people calling in by phone, and because of that, you might not have the option of participating by computer. We've designed this room to be able to take phone call users as well, and we can collect your input verbally or by text. That being said, we do encourage you to provide text responses if you're reasonably able to do so without any technical issues or financial burdens. Text responses allow us to more accurately capture your input. So as we talk through the ways in which we can provide input today, I do want to note that there is a new, actually, I think it's the same number here. It's still it's KW poll 2 instead of KW poll 1. So when we get to the questions, I'll walk through what that looks like. But if people are already responding to questions, no, we're actually starting a new browser window. So if you're not able to text or if you're not able to join by browser to respond to the polls, you can also respond verbally to ask some clarifying questions or provide input. You can do that through the raise hand option. And that raise hand option is if you dial *9 on your phone, it lets me know you have a question. I'll unmute you in the order that I see hands raised. You'll have to push *6 as well on your end, but we'll walk through that when we get to it. And I wanted to just note here, I think we have a different phone number, and we'll add that to the chat. I think I gave you the wrong phone number. I wanted to make sure you can call the right person or text the right person if you do have technical difficulties. All right. Again, if you're not able to share your oral response or your text response or join by browser, consider noting your responses and recording them in the public input questionnaire available at www.californianature.ca.gov. Okay, so we're back on this screen. We're going to use Poll Everywhere again. But if you're on a computer, you need to re-enter the link into your browser. So it's going to be pollev.com/kwpoll2. So if you had another browser window open, you can close that browser window and open a new one, pollev.com/kwpoll2 on your computer or your smartphone. By text message, you can text KW poll 2 to the number 22333. So if you already have a text chain open, just write a new message in that text chain, KW poll 2. Okay, so we will, these numbers will also be available at the top of each of the slides. And so if you aren't able to pull it up right now, or if you've stepped away, you can pull it up at the beginning of each slide. So we're going to be inviting public input in response to 10 total questions. And participants will have about 5 to 6 minutes for each question. I'll make sure you know when there's 1 to 2 minutes left. And I'll also be just, Mark and I will be reading through and finding some themes that we see come in. What I do want to say is, you need to take your time in crafting responses to the questions. So it's okay if you have, if you need to take a few minutes, we have time for that. So we will be starting with question 1, and it's on regional interests and current efforts. I do want to let folks know, if you see as you're typing in or texting in your responses, you don't need to underscore anymore. We ask that you type in 1 line per answer, so you can answer multiple times, but 1 line per answer. It'll allow us to see what's on the screen here. You might not see your response on the screen, and you might see some going by here, and just know everything you type into Poll Everywhere will get on the back end. And so no worries about that being captured there. Okay, so let's begin. So thinking about biodiversity in the region, what species, habitats, or places are important to protect? So I've already seen quite a few responses coming in about grasslands and wetlands, specifically the Valley Oak wetlands, woodlands, the acorn woodpecker, vernal pools. And as these are coming through, I want to remind folks, if you're on your phone, you can dial *9 to add your verbal response to. So *9 will let us know to provide your verbal response. All right, vernal pools, I see. Groundwater dependent habitats that have no connection to surface water. Riparian corridors and riparian areas. Foothills. So biodiversity in the region. And so we've defined biodiversity as biological and diversity, the 2 words put together. So all variety of life that can be found on the planet Earth. I have seen quite a few responses come in about the oak woodlands and riparian areas. I see those as being some multiple responses coming in. River corridors, San Joaquin Valley T&E species, kit fox, kangaroo rats. Raptors, an appropriate habitat. Desert scrub habitats, vernal pools, grasslands, the San Joaquin Desert, historic Tule Lake area, Tulare Lake, saltbrush scrub, wetland marsh, and riparian. And again, if you're a phone call-in user, we invite you to press *9 on your phone to let us know. Rivers, riparian areas, the Bakersfield cactus, the California tiger salamander, urban parks and rural communities as biodiversity are as an area that important to protect. Other things important to protect, agricultural areas, migrating waterfowl, vernal pools, mountain meadows.
Definitely seems like vernal pools is in the lead.
I am seeing that. I wish we could, these are such long answers too, but it would be cool to see a word cloud as well of like some of the bigger things. Don't show it, my team, because it would look really odd, but I think vernal pools are coming up. Wetlands, desert regions, the woodlands as well. Farmland. Let's do another minute or so, and then we'll move on to our next question.
Some threatened species, tricolored blackbird.
Mm-hmm. Conti's thrasher, wetlands and streams. So we're seeing some common themes come through, but also just very specific species, habitats, and places as well. Wonderful.
Yeah, the group knows their diversity for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's move on to the next question. And I want to, for folks who have just joined us, the link to this poll is in the chat. You can join by your browser. You can send a text message well. I'm not sure if we have any phone call-in users. If we do, you can press *9 on your phone and give verbal response. So the second question is, thinking about this region, what nature-based climate solutions are important to you? So Amanda mentioned some examples in her remarks, including community greening, wetland restoration, climate-smart agricultural innovations, private land management. So thinking about the region, what nature-based climate solutions are important to you? So we'll take a minute here. And every now and then, we just have to sync up our poll everywhere. We're getting so many responses in. I do want to let everyone know, even if you're not seeing them here, everything that you're texting in or writing into your browser is being captured. So I'm going to have Jasmine, if you're able to, oh, here we go. Got it through. So this region, what nature-based climate solutions are important? Prescribed burning, perpetual conservation easements, diversified agriculture, shade by trees in cities, say groundwater banking, community greening in rural areas, climate capture by grasslands. A reminder to folks, you can press *9 on your phone and you can give your verbal response as well. Agroecology. Seeing another one in for urban green spaces and community greening. Retirement of farmland with high salinity in soils. Community green belts. Mulching. Riparian protection restoration. Composting. The Los Banos Creek Reservoir. All right, tribal ownership of conservation lands. Groundwater banking, we've seen that a couple times come through. Native plant restoration and conservation in oil fields. Riparian restoration, wetlands that recharge the groundwater table.
Good one.
Reforestation for oak woodlands. Reforestation of native habitat. Collaboration with land trusts. Hedgerows. Regenerative agriculture. Saw a couple conservation easements come through. Return water to the San Joaquin River. Fee title acquisitions of important lands. Promoting organic farming. Use of native plants in urban areas. Caltrans and County Road native plant landscaping. I see a note here on cultural burning and soil management and pesticide use. Farming practices like reducing monocropping. The removal of dams that prevent free-flowing rivers. The first question, we had a lot of responses about vernal pools. I see here vernal pool restoration and preservation. The transition to diversified and organic agriculture. Okay, so we have about another minute for this question. So as you're thinking through and seeing some responses come through, you can add a couple more. More research on the impacts of water diversions and their impact on streams. Micro irrigation, yep.
There's been a few urban sprawl ones to prevent urban sprawl.
Great. And recreating natural areas near towns. Aligned with that. Crop rotation. All right, ban steam injection oil drilling. And climate smart agriculture. So there'll be a few more, they might have come in a little earlier, they're going through, but we've captured them all on the back end. So I'm gonna move us on to our next question. All right, so our third question. is with regard to 30 by 30 and or nature-based solutions, how can we advance equity and opportunity in this region?
Make sure everyone has access to clean water and air, easy access to nature, invest in rural communities, increase capacity of community-based and community benefit organizations like land trusts, resource conservation districts, and tribes. Reach out to underrepresented communities to provide input, remove unintentional barriers to inclusion, more bike paths, parks, and communities, investment in public spaces, access to clean water, increased cultural and linguistic interpretation, get kids outdoors as part of their education, more surface and groundwater storage, air quality, access to nature local to where people live, funding for public lands, restoring areas adjacent to urban and rural communities, lots of clean air comments, management by Native peoples, funding for a wide variety of things on parks and urban greening, a lot of clean air, clean water, definitely getting some themes, that's for sure. Outreach for existing funding mechanisms, transportation issues, funding to support multi-benefit projects, smaller, cheaper houses, involve the Tule River Tribe, parking, again, transit, making sure there's connectivity, capping oil wells with methane leaks, separate permitting, pipeline restoration, management, stewardship projects, etc. Access to water, conservation jobs and training, education programs targeting underprivileged kids, more public trail access, restore the San Joaquin River watershed since it goes through both urban and rural communities. Educational field trip example of folks who do a good job there. Ecosystem service mapping, funding that requires participation of disadvantaged communities, bikeways. Insist that other parts of California that export air pollution to the region do their part to reduce air pollution. More clean water, easy access to grant funds for conservation, repair water infrastructure, increase capacities to land trusts and resource conservation districts, which will create more jobs and protect the landscape. Multilingual outreach, more conservation easements, native plants and parks. Urban greening should focus first where there's currently the least green space. Acquire and steward nature near local valley residents. Diversification of infrastructure to include more people-centered design. It's a creative one. Restore natural habitats near and in cities and rural towns. A lot of these are the same. Establishment of state park in the San Joaquin Valley. Better regulation of pesticides and herbicides. Increase land access for new farmers and farmers of color. On the ground engagement from the government for better stewardship of the land. More public access to park and rec of our natural resources. Getting kids outside. Youth employment to improve stewardship practices. Tribes provide the lands which are historically important. Smaller houses. I think we're pretty much hitting the same. Are we getting there? Jenna?
We're getting there. I'd say let's do another 30 seconds as we watch them come in, but I've seen so many rich responses come through.
Disincentivizing ag practices that lead to negative outcomes like annual tilling of fallowed idled lands. Tule River Tribe. Streamline permitting process for conservation projects, cutting the green tape. Preventing biomass plants from being used on the valley floor.
All right, well, let's move on, Mark, to the next question, just to keep us on time. So this next question is question 4A. There's two parts. So the first part is what is working in this region to conserve lands and or coastal waters and implement nature-based solutions to climate change. So we want to know what's working. We want to know success stories. We want to know what's successful in existing strategies and existing programs, projects, initiatives, things that you think are working well. And then as you're thinking about your responses, are there specific goals or targets that can support these successful efforts? So what's working well and what's a success in implementing nature-based solutions to climate change in this region? And as we're waiting for responses to come in, what is working well? What's a success? Agriculture conservation easements, Williamson Act contracts, conservation easements on rangelands, communities that right now have climate smart lands. And again, if you're a phone call-in user, you can click *9 on your phone or press *9 on your phone to give a verbal response as well. Personalized conservation plans for private landowners working with USDA and RCS. Money for bikeways. Agroecology. Seeing a note specifically about conservation easements, voluntary conservation easements are effective and economical tool. The empowerment of river conservancies. Seen the Williamson Act come in a couple times, so the Williamson Act again. Private duck club owners who pay for habitat enhancements and are under conservation easements. And another reminder for folks too, if you are in one of the interpretation channels and you want to give a response, we can also have that in the chat as well. Target public investments to stabilize the urban edge of cities to stop urban sprawl. Investing near disadvantaged communities. Groundwater recharge on agricultural lands and floodwater. How do I say that name? Attenuation? That word. Attunement. Land and waters currently available for wildlife-dependent recreation. National parks. Parks, community gardens, recreation land. I'm seeing specifically the environmental quality incentive programs. The San Joaquin River Parkway and Conservation Trust land. So what's working? A couple folks might not have experienced much as working. Seeing more public transportation. Regional conservation land trusts like Sequoia Riverlands Trust. Some urban forestry efforts. Working with community-based organizations. Adopt a highway. Recognition of the positive role that fishing and hunting play in conservation. Someone is hopeful for the SGMA for Sigma.
Yeah, groundwater management, sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
We're definitely seeing a lot of acronyms.
The acronyms. I think we have folks on this line here who are involved in some efforts as well.
Yeah, definitely with USDA and RCS, we've seen a lot of that.
Mm-hmm. Seen quite a few duck clubs as well. Urban greening in rural communities. Okay, let's do another minute or so with this question. Any other success that you can think about in this region to implement nature-based solutions?
There's a good example. Sequoia Riverlands Trust, 40,000 acres protected.
Mm-hmm. A good target and a good goal identified with that too. All right, ditto, stopping urban sprawl, growing cities while saving farmland. Riparian buffers. All right, so I'm going to move us on to our next question. This is 4B. So this question 4A was what is working in the region to conserve lands. This 4B is what is working in the region to increase equitable access to nature and its benefits. So equitable access to nature and its benefits. So again, success stories, strategies, programs, policies that you think are working well. If you're a phone call-in user, *9 to provide your response, *9 to provide your response. So I'm seeing things that are working well. Parks, community gardens, open space within walking distance of underserved communities. So that location and easy access. Programs that are size neutral. The expansion of the Kern River bike path. Restoring areas near communities. I say more is needed, but action from the San Joaquin River Conservancy is working to increase equitable access.
Lots of great specific examples. Good to see.
And as you're writing specific examples too, are there aspects of those specific examples that help it work? Are there programs that in that example, are there goals, targets that you see as successful as well? Get a little deeper. A few more programs like the Tuolumne River Trust Modesto area programs, the City of Fresno's Parks Initiative. NGOs taking kids to national forests for service projects. Another program here, the Sequoia Rivers Trust in Tulare County office. You know, and I think we've seen those in other questions as well. So thanks for continuing to provide such rich responses and such location-specific responses too in this region. It's great to see. The Sierra Foothill Conservancy's Hikes and Classics programs. Camp Keep. Temporary measures to eliminate or reduce the cost to access. So thinking about during COVID, what's going to be offered after COVID. Local measures and orgs push for more parks and green space access. The San Joaquin River Parkway camps, including the River Camp, school garden programs. Seen Camp Keep come through a couple times. I appreciate the specific examples as well. Racial bias training with police officers. The Grassland Environmental Education Center. And as we're seeing these specific responses come through and you're hearing them, I want to invite our call-in users, press *9 on your phone. We'd love to hear from you as well. *9 on your phone to hear from you as well.
Windwell's Nature Conservancy's come up a couple times.
Mm-hmm. All right, we have another minute or so. addressing how racism and white supremacy creates a hostile outdoor culture. The Sierra Conservancy classes and hikes, things that are working in the region. Get some responses that it could be better. Connection to adjacent national parks, how to connect folks to those areas. We have a question in the future about challenges too and opportunities, and so those might be good to expand upon there as well. Drought planning, Center for Land-Based Learning hosts field day trips for kids. Meeting app, hiking groups. All right, the UC Cooperative Extension programs for land management. Okay, so I'm seeing such great responses come in. We're going to move us on to our next question. This is the last question in this section here. So the question is, the state of California is committed to conserving 30% of its lands and coastal waters by 2030. And what does conservation mean to you? So conservation has not yet been defined by the state in this context. So we're asking, what does conservation mean to you? You can press *9 on your phone. Again, it's helpful if you're going to the next question on your browser window to refresh that browser window.
Sustainable use of resources, protecting and restoring natural lands. Permanent protection is the foundation for secure investment in stewardship, restoration, and access. Again, permanent protections, ecosystem resilience, active stewardship, increased public ownership of important lands. Permanent, again, meaningful protection of biodiversity. Sustainable use of soil, water, air, plants, animals, energy. Local species integrity. Consideration of existing protected areas and measuring progress towards stated goals. Habitat preservation and restoration. And permanent protection, prioritizing biodiversity over monocropping, reducing soil erosion, protecting health and wealth of those communities, reversal of past damage, protection and management to alleviate threats to natural and cultural values, restoring lands to environmental function, targeted science-based conservation measures developed through a stakeholder-driven process to address biodiversity threats, like that one. Improve soil health, that was a good definition. Learning to use land and resources without abusing them. Proactive and deliberate site management tactics, stewardship of landscapes and resources, ensures human and wild communities can coexist. Ensuring water for sensitive habitat. Sustainable use of lands again. Conservation and restoration of habitat connectivity through protection of linkages and reduction of fragmentation in intact lands. Conservation means managing the lands to allow them to be utilized and enjoyed by the public. Public ownership only works if the funds are there to manage those lands. Otherwise, private management's better. Strong protective stewardship by land managers, government and private. Clean up toxic areas to protect plants and animals, hopefully people too. Habitat protection and restoration. Ag lands under permanent easement that prevent fragmentation or conversion. Acquiring lands that benefit local BIPOC communities. Mitigating impacts of flooding. From the San Joaquin region, conservation's restoration of Tulare Lake. Groundwater, sustainable ag, and wildlife and game management. Reestablishing biodiversity. Conservation of lands near low-income rural communities. Clearly define roles and authorities for the entities charged with carrying out the 30 by 30 initiative proposal. sustainable restorative management of permanently protected lands and water, protection of resources, again, in perpetuity. Some of the same. Use important plant areas in making decisions. Increased irrigation efficiency. Green land with organic, native edible plants. Enhancing biodiversity up to a scientifically determined ecological peak condition. More conservation easements, deed restrictions. Climate resilience. Reduction of groundwater depletion. No carbon offset markets. Interesting for conservation. Enduring measures that support secure and thriving biodiversity.
So maybe another minute or so.
Okay, improving ecosystem health and public health. Conservation is an active process. Partner with schools to educate younger generations. Delist endangered species. Conservation needs to explicitly address intersectional issues and concerns, prioritizing economic equity and racial justice, as well as in conjunction with, I assume, environmental protection. Improving rangeland health. Connectivity, wildlife corridors. Landscape scale management of permanently protected lands that sequester carbon through increased soil health. Land given back to indigenous communities. Reduction in the risk of wildfire. Shall we wind it down, Jenna?
We are. So let's do read one more out and then head on to the next question.
Livable cities surrounded by healthy landscapes.
All right, I think that's a great place to end. So let's move on to the next question. We're actually going into challenges now. So we want you to think about, as we move into these challenges, the first question is, and if you're on your phone, *9, refresh your browser window on your phone or your computer so you see this here, question 6A. Describe the greatest challenges to conserving lands and implementing nature-based solutions to climate change. The greatest challenges to conserving lands and or coastal waters and implementing nature-based solutions to climate change. So this is kind of a packed question. We're talking about challenges to conserving lands, challenges to implementing nature-based solutions, and then we're thinking in that context of climate change. And so you can either break your answer up into themes or just into different topic areas, or just as it comes to you, what are the greatest challenges to conserving lands and coastal waters and implementing nature-based solutions? So I see land conversion and large-scale agriculture, a lack of funding, a lack of political will, a challenge being habitat degradation, cooperation between agencies, sprawl developers and agribusinesses, financial incentives, corporate greed, funding. Seen funding come through quite a few times. Willing landowners. The challenge is climate change. There's a lack of surface water. Insufficient investment for restoration. Seeing a challenge is harmful ag practices, water use and pesticides, but also multiple regulatory programs, creating different incentives. Freshwater access. Seeing another note for political will. And in all caps, lack of adequate funding. I think we're seeing that come through pretty strong as a challenge. Local land use planning variability. private landowners and farmers who might not believe in climate change, the scarcity of water. See agribusiness, heavy dependence on synthetic pesticides, specifically funding for acquisition and funding for capacity like land trusts, staff time. Seeing a note here that the region is often overlooked. Unsustainable water management, especially for agricultural businesses. Continued fossil fuel extraction in California's southern Central Valley. Interagency cooperation. Nature-based solutions have positive and negative impacts. Another note for funding. Campaign contributions that influence political representation, opaque permitting and planning processes, urban sprawl, cutting green tape.
I think that's green tape.
Green tape. It gave me pause. We talked about equity earlier, inequitable access to natural areas. Our next question, keep in mind, campaign finance reform is needed for legislative policy development. We have another minute or so on this question, and so if you've seen any responses come through that remind you of another, you can do that. And also as a reminder, *9 on your phone as well, *9. There's too many people, a lack of local political will, urban sprawl, resource agencies, corporate greed. Investment for rural communities. All right, I'm going to move us on to our next question. It's a similar question, but it's the challenges to increasing equitable access to nature and its benefits. So equitable access to nature and its benefits. So what are the barriers that we need to overcome? It could be information needs, it could be priorities. We've seen funding, but what specifically about funding? So I see the slow process of grant funding and grant cycles. And I think Mark will be able to see some good ones pop out here as well.
Transportation costs for working class families, historical and systemic barriers involving native lands. We're getting pretty harsh here. Elitist control of conservation programs, many grant programs without good outreach, cultural acceptance of accessing nature, again, lack of public transportation, funding for capacity, tribal capacity in particular, historical local planning that led to segregated communities, so like redlining, distance, you have to travel to get there, need for open space for kids, white supremacy, underserved communities can't get to natural areas, lack of paid leave, access to nature close to neighborhoods, I assume that's lack of knowledge of natural areas and what's out there, not enough places to go, linguistic and cultural barriers, the urban-rural divide, costs to enter natural areas, low income, time. Families often have many jobs, no spare time. Transportation's come up a bunch. Land conversion into farmland, poor maintenance, or local planning. Overuse of the few places there are. Negative perception of species preservation. Funding. A lot of transportation.
Yeah, that's coming through pretty strong.
Yep. Local access to nature, really the last couple, redlining. Overuse of the few places there are again. Cultural and social messages that don't emphasize the natural heritage of valley communities. Urban kids have to have nature in their lives. Competition for time with organized sports, structured activities for kids. Fear of nature by those who are not connected to nature. Hard to apply for grant programs unless you're a consultant firm. Poor outreach. Old-timey, that's the first use of old-timey today. Politicians. Public access. Air pollution, in particular some fumigants. Unconscious barriers and lack of welcoming and inclusive atmosphere. CEQA needing teeth to address mitigation, cumulative impacts, and alternatives. Again, path trails, parks, etc., near the neighborhoods. Transportation, transportation, transportation. And greater education, what's already out there. Unjust labor conditions, the oppression of immigrant and farm laborers deny them the resources and time to access nature. Local job training programs that train youth from local communities. Current refugia don't even get the amount of water they need because of ag. More public bathrooms, housing development.
All right, another minute or so.
Okay. Language barriers. Parking. Historical separation of nature and communities. Loss of traditional ecological knowledge. Permitting is too arduous and complex. Lack of buffer zones and green zones around rural communities. Safety issues. Seems like we're pretty much there, right, Jenna?
I think so. Well, let's move us on to our last section here. Our last section is on opportunities. So again, for our calling users, *9. But this question, we want you to think really big. So what does long-term success look like for nature-based climate solutions in the region? So thinking future, thinking big, big, big. What does long-term success mean? So I see the elimination of wildfire risk, the phasing out of extractive practices, recovery of threatened and endangered species, that Tulare Lake is restored, that urban landscapes include rich native plants. There's wide public engagement in land stewardship, reduced public ownership, increased public funding and obligations. All endangered species are delisted. There's the groundwater is in balance. There's acreage set aside for wildlife. Again, thinking big, thinking future, that we're restoring ecosystem services. There's a broad-based sustainable way of life in the area. Nature is again an important part of people's lives. We saw notes before about duck clubs, the continued existence of private duck clubs. That air quality meets EPA standards. Workforce transition into equitable, green, clean jobs, and the overlap of these have with conservation. Improved quality of life. leadership by Indigenous people, that we're protecting wildflower fields, that vernal pools are protected and restored, that our grandchildren are able to access and enjoy the same public lands that we recreate in now. There's protection and connection of local waterways, where local planning incorporates biodiversity and environmental justice. Long-term success looks like green areas in and out of communities are connected by green corridors. Success looks like stopping the conversion of native landscapes to agriculture or other uses. Less fire suppression and more prevention. No species are lost to extinction because of people and climate change. That the Tulare Lake is restored. That the region is viewed as a place to visit rather than just the valley to drive through. There's a new pride of place that includes not just agricultural heritage, but natural heritage, a sense of comfort and pride. Success looking like different implementation infrastructures, like community land trusts, thinking about multiple co-benefits. Phasing out of soil fumigants. I've seen a couple notes that success is groundwater no longer being depleted. Success is that all habitats are conserved. There's less need for private vehicles. And one more minute here. Big picture, success look like in the future for nature-based climate solutions. But we're near the end, and if there's any phone call-in users who want to call, you can press *9 on your phone too, just a reminder. There's wildfire management, that duck clubs are open to everyone. There's extensive urban greening. That all disadvantaged communities have access to clean water and clean air. There's implementation and promotion of traditional ecological knowledge as a primary stewardship approach. Okay, we're going to go on to our last question here. Our last question, I'm going to have Mark identify the responses here. What does success look like for 3030? What does success look like for 3030? What do you hope happens in the region? This could be higher regional outcome level or also project specific.
Clearly define roles and authorities for the entities charged with carrying out the 30 by 30 initiative proposal. Expanding access for rural areas, carbon neutrality, phasing out fracking. It's weird for 30 by 30. Recognition of the positive role that fishing and hunting play in conservation. All proposed wilderness areas at the edge of the valley been designated. GHG emissions reductions, reverse human caused climate change, same thing twice. Reduce risk of soil erosion, leveraging the work of local land trusts. Focus investments in the San Joaquin Valley. 50 by 50, there's some optimism. Funding not only for protecting the little remaining habitat, but restoring habitat where so much has been lost, like the valley floor. Habitat improvements for the San Joaquin River. Clean air, water, soil, net zero energy use. Reversing declines in wild populations. Investments and priorities for the Pacific Flyway, a list of things. Delisting some species, hopefully through recovery. Stopping oil production, increasing total acreage, I assume of protected areas, coordinated land management practices among public agencies, carbon sequestration at a rapid pace. Again, natural landscapes similar. All habitats conserve not just the most common. Leadership role for Native peoples. continued public engagement in conservation and land stewardship, better air quality, preventing habitat conversion, a significant increase in public lands in the region, including state and federal lands for humans and wildlife. People know where their conserved lands are and how they can access them. Sustainable, resilient ecosystems, increased investments, prioritization of conservation efforts that stack benefits, like providing wetland habitat and protecting shallow or domestic, I assume that's groundwater. Targeted science-based conservation measures developed through a stakeholder-driven process to address biodiversity threats. Kind of describes what we're trying to get done here. Political will to prioritize the work, local land trusts again, intact landscapes are well preserved. People never notice that there's a drought. Mandatory regenerative agriculture, a shift towards increasingly diversified farms and ranches, again, clean air and water, creating a funding set aside for disadvantaged communities, elimination of flood risk, restoring land near neighborhoods, more air quality improvement so disadvantaged communities, particularly in Kern County, can breathe their own clean air. State version of the USDA NRCS EQIP. All people have access to nature. Improving soil health through eliminating soil fumigation, protecting important bird areas, water for wetlands and wildlife, freshwater habitats and species stable or increasing to sustainable populations. The last 30 of 30 by 30 by 30 being investments into social justice efforts. Justice for tribal people. Integrating 30 by 30 with the intense equity and justice needs of the San Joaquin Valley. Valley communities have a rewilding plan. Support investments in Sigma to ensure wetland groundwater needs. Collaborating with grassroots communities, local government and regional buy-in. Again, a statement on oil production and eliminating. We almost there?
We have about another minute and then we're going to have to wrap up.
Great.
A couple more responses.
California investing in nonprofits and their capacity. Sustainability is part of who we are as a culture. Pacific Flyway restoration. Scale of goal leads to streamlined permitting for conservation projects. So there's that cutting the green tape again. Quality of life for all people substantively improved. That would be great. San Joaquin River watershed being restored and having its floodplains restored. All right, Jenna.
So I want to thank everyone for this really specific, rich, robust response. Thank you so much. The last thank you was for you, Mark. So thank you, Mark. But I really want to thank everyone for joining us today, for sharing your ideas and experiences during today's meeting. As a reminder, we're being recorded and this will be available online at www.californianature.ca.gov. We'll be posting meeting summaries with non-attributable comments captured during these meetings. You can also provide feedback on today's experience by completing a post-workshop evaluation that will be emailed to you. We want you to stay connected by visiting www.californianature.ca.gov. You can provide additional written comments through the public input questionnaire. You can sign up to attend a future event. So again, we thank you so much for engaging with us. In the chat box, our tech support has provided how to get to californianature.ca.gov, the email address you can email, how you can reach us by postal mail, how you can reach us by voicemail. We want to hear from you. I'm going to turn it back over to Mark Gold for any final words.
Yeah, just to echo my thank you and from Jenna, and really, I can't emphasize enough that really your participation makes a big difference. Your perspective of the San Joaquin Valley region, very, very different from the 4 other perspectives we've seen from other workshops. So I'm really glad we had the opportunity to really hear from you and really, frankly, on my end, to learn a great deal more about the San Joaquin Valley and what's important to you and what you think we can do a heck of a lot better. So thanks again, and I hope everybody has a great evening tonight.
Great, thank you, Mark. And just for everyone, the workshop's now over. You can press leave at the bottom of your screen to leave the workshop or exit out. We're glad to have you here today, and we will see you next time. Thank you.
Thanks, Jenna. That was fun.
Thanks, Mark. So many
Right.
great responses.
Yeah.
We'll see you later.
Very different, for sure. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye. And thank you to our interpreters as well.